Ladies and gentlemen, hit subscribe to this channel right now. According to the forensic accountant on Newsweek, other publications, there are more indictments ahead. The forensic accountant that was a big part of this case, there are others who are also very involved in this case that say, according to reports, there are more indictments for Letitia James, for James Comey, and for others in terms of Attorney General James. There was a rental property in Brooklyn, for example, that isn't listed in the original indictment that allegedly she lied about in terms of units. That could be potential insurance fraud, but also mortgage fraud, because if it's 4 as opposed to 5 units in Brooklyn, that is a big deal. Anyway, hit subscribe. Go to H.A. Goodman's other channel right after this, ladies and gentlemen. Subscribe there. And to my super chat, thank you. This is huge. Let's get started. You're going to hear you're going to hear all of the allegations in addition to the indictment. So the indictment does not list all the allegations. Again, the indictment that Letitia James received does not address all the alleged mortgage fraud. You're going to hear that right now from Jonathan Turley and others. Hit subscribe to my super chat. I can't do this without you.
That attorneys general representing our respective states stand up and enforce the rule of law. The president of these United States is not above the law.
No matter how rich, powerful, or politically connected you are, everyone must play by the same rules.
Please sue him for us.
Oh, we're going to definitely sue him. We're going to be a real pain in the
And now the Trump Justice Department may be a pain in her you-know-what. The Angle has obtained shocking allegations leveled by the Trump administration.
So this is a couple of months before the indictment the other day, but you're going to hear the full list, or at least a longer list of allegations that are almost certainly going to be leveled against James in superseding indictments
Against New York Attorney General Letitia James. The Federal Housing Finance Agency has sent a criminal referral to the DOJ accusing James of mortgage fraud. In a letter to Attorney General Pam Bondi, Director Bill Pulte says James appears to have falsified records in order to meet certain lending requirements and receive favorable loan terms. He cited a property in Virginia that she's allegedly claimed as her principal residence and a property in New York that she claimed as a 4-unit structure instead of the required, instead of a 5, which Pulte says means she was able to get.
Are you looking to
receive favor Letitia James?
So the Virginia property is listed in the indictment, I believe, but the Brooklyn property is not. That's just one of the several allegations not listed in the initial indictment, which is why there will likely be a superseding indictment.
The Federal Housing Finance Agency has sent a criminal referral to the DOJ accusing James of mortgage fraud. In a letter to Attorney General Pam Bondi, Director Bill Pulte says James appears to have falsified records in order to meet certain lending requirements and receive favorable loan terms. He cited a property in Virginia that she's allegedly claimed as her principal residence and a property in New York that she claimed as a 4-unit structure instead of the required, instead of a 5, which Pulte says means she was able to get a different type and more favorable loan. Joining me now is Jonathan.
So the 4-unit structure that she apparently owns, she allegedly put on documents as the 5-unit structure that she apparently owns, she put as a 4-unit structure, which would give her lower insurance rates and lower mortgage rates and lower property tax assessment, and she would have to pay less property tax. So if she did those things, that's actually a lot more serious than the initial indictment.
Turley, Fox News contributor and law professor at GW University. Jonathan, mortgage fraud is rampant in the United States. There's all sorts of fraud that's rampant. There's disability fraud that they've vowed to crack down on in the Trump administration. But this is another thing that they have vowed to crack down on because it costs real money. Your reaction to these allegations?
Well, obviously, the irony is perfectly crushing. This is a person who prosecuted Trump for everything short of ripping a label off a mattress. And among the charges that were brought in New York, in not just the civil but the criminal case, was making false or misleading statements to financial institutions. And one of these sections, Section 1014 of the federal code, is prosecuted. It took me about 60 seconds of a search to find cases that the Department of Justice brought against people who falsely claimed that property was their principal residence in order to get loans. So this is well-tread areas for the Justice Department. As for James, if we apply the LETICIA James standard that she created, there'd be little question here. This seems pretty straightforward. What the administration is saying is this was not her principal residence. In fact, as a New York elected official, she had to say that her principal residence was in New York. This was an out-of-state residence, but also.
And that's the thing with James and Adam Schiff. It's like they were saying, oh, it's not that big of a deal. Oh, the lending institutions knew. It's like, well, you went after Trump for the most absurd reasons. Even though he's a billionaire, you said he inflated his net worth. This is not only inflating or lying about, lying on loan documents to obtain better rates, but they were politicians that had to live in New York or California. Schiff had to have a permanent residence in California to obtain the loan he did, according to the public record. James had to have lived in New York to be working as Attorney General. She could not have a primary residence in Virginia and still be the Attorney General of New York. That's another element here.
They claim that in some of these forms, she actually states that her father is her husband in order to file.
And let's listen to that again.
There'd be little question here. This seems pretty straightforward. What the administration is saying is this was not her principal residence. In fact, as a New York elected official, she had to clear in March in a case called Thompson that they want to see knowing false statements under sections like 1014, not just misleading statements. These are misleading statements. Either it's your principal residence or it's not.
Or it's not.
Either you're married to your father or he's your father. So they can this can satisfy the Thompson standard.
Yeah, well, Jonathan, we reached out to the DOJ and they have no comment on this referral. We also reached out to Attorney General James, who did not respond to us either. So again, everyone wants the best interest rate you can get. I understand that. But, she's a lawyer. She knows that when you sign a mortgage application, that mortgage application, if you're borrowing money, if you're not borrowing money, nobody cares whether it's your principal residence, except, where you file your taxes. But she decided to state that that was her principal residence, knowing it was not her principal residence. I didn't even know she had property. I mean, I guess she had property in Virginia and she has rental or investment property in New York. That's fine. But in the New York matter, to get the favorable rate, the building could only have 4 units. But for, it looks like the entirety of this building, it had 5 units, meaning it was in violation of the actual loan agreement. And again, this is not a novel application of the law, Jonathan. As you stated during the persecution of Donald Trump, she was using all these novel applications of law to go after him. This isn't novel. This is a black and white issue. You either did or you didn't.
Right, and this has been prosecuted in the past. Now, we have not heard her side of this, but these documents themselves are quite damning. It's hard to see how the residences listed were her principal residence. The business about her father is just bizarre. Now, I'll note that one of the things that Letitia James stressed in her case against Trump is that Trump had to review documents that were filed in his name. And so she dismissed the argument that this was something that Trump's people put together. She said he's ultimately responsible. So they allege that she gave a power of attorney in a couple of these instances, but according to her own standard, that's not enough.
Well, Professor, the referral cites the case against the former Baltimore City prosecutor, Marilyn Mosby, because she was sentenced to a year in home confinement for lying about her finances to make early withdrawals from retirement funds during COVID, and then fraudulently claimed that her own $5,000 was a gift from her then husband as she closed on a Florida condo. So the idea that again, this is just no one ever goes after politicians for these types of, which may seem like small amounts, and they add up.
They do, and this is really for James, the very case that she most famously brought. She insisted that these technicalities matter and that the powerful should not be given a free pass. Well, that bill has come due in this case. She's going to have to deal with this filing. I'm honestly just not sure how you defend against this unless you say that these are fraudulent documents.
Jonathan, I have to raise.
And that's the issue. See, with Trump, they went after him for insurance. They were talking about insurance fraud. I think they actually put that as one of the things he allegedly committed in terms of crimes. Inflating net worth. He was a billionaire. Mar-a-Lago alone is $1.5 billion. They went out of their way to say that Mar-a-Lago is only worth $17 million, something absurd like that. Then when they were caught, they said, well, it was only a tax assessment. It wasn't the judge. It's like, well, you didn't have to use the tax assessment. You could have found a real estate agent in Palm Beach, and they could have told you. There was one on Fox Business with Maria Bartiromo. $1.5 billion Mar-a-Lago was worth. Deutsche Bank literally was his defense. So Deutsche Bank went to his defense, and the $500 million judgment was tossed out by the New York State Supreme Court. So, or the highest court in New York, okay? The highest court in New York overturned the ruling that Letitia James obtained. People have been convicted of exactly what Letitia James did. Nobody was ever convicted as a former president with $1.5 billion in real estate at Mar-a-Lago. That never happened. But let's continue.
The administration accused New York Attorney General Letitia.
Houses shouldn't throw stones.
Right.
It's beyond ironic that the allegations that she's now facing stem from the exact same types of mortgage fraud or loan type fraud that Trump went through that incredible civil trial on, where he defended himself, and he said that those banks and those financial institutions that he dealt with had acknowledged and had their own fair opportunity to look into and do their research. The allegations against Letitia James are not quite as friendly to her, and they look quite damning. Now, the DOJ is going to start their investigation. That's going to take some time. I don't know how many resources they're going to put behind that, but if these allegations that are being put forth turn out to be true, she is going to be facing the same sort of bankruptcy and turning over of her assets to the state that Donald Trump had to through that trial.
Well, I've got a follow-on question for this. Do you remember the February meeting between Trump and Governor Hochul, New York Governor Hochul, over New York City's congestion tax? Well, the New York Post is reporting that Hochul threatened Trump over the measure. She referred to the appeal against his civil fraud case and told him, "I control the judges." Hochul is denying that report. But my question is Trump still subject to that $480 million penalty?
So this was before it was tossed out, but again, Trump won. Yet again, he won.
How's that going to play out?
Well, that appeal has been going on forever at this point. It is well beyond the normal amount of time that the appeal courts look at a case like this, and he is incurring interest in the amount of over $100,000 a day for that bond that he had to put up while the court slowly goes through it. Now, the Governor Hochul piece of it is, as of right now, kind of a he said, she said type of situation where she's denying that she said these things, but they sound like things that could be said, where she's leveraging her powers in the state to try to gain some sort of power or advantage in the negotiations that she's got with the White House. All of that's going to play out. I don't see that being a criminal matter at this moment.
So this is before President Trump won, but you could see they did not. LETICIA James wanted hundreds of thousands of dollars in interest. She went after Trump for $500 million. Okay, and lost. But again, it's like the Democrats say, well, this is retribution. Well, retribution for what? Trying in a very unethical manner to destroy someone. Okay, you can't do that. Bernie Sanders, Joe Biden, they're the types of people, if they're told to do something that they know is wrong, they'll do it. Took Biden 3 weeks to just step down. Bernie Sanders never even acknowledged the fact he was cheated 10 years ago. But Trump, don't do that to Trump. You create a world where if you put one thing wrong on a document, it's the end of the world. If you create that world, okay, you created that type of legal system.
Meanwhile, the DOJ is opening a formal criminal probe into New York Attorney General LETICIA James over suspected mortgage fraud. Andrew Cherkasky is a former federal prosecutor and joins us now. And Andrew, James is saying basically that the law is on her side. Listen here.
We're ready. We're prepared. Do not give in to fear. We are fearless. This is not the time to be afraid. This is a time to stand up and fight back and to resist any temptation for them to divide us. We're in this together.
She has a $10 million legal fee. The people who are clapping, if she went to jail for 30 years, would not visit her. So this is the Democratic Party machine. She has a $10 million legal fund, I believe funded either by Democratic donors. I'm not sure if it's taxpayers, New York taxpayers, or Democratic donors. But she has a $10 million legal fund, and it's not going to last that long. She has some very good, she has a good legal team, but it's pretty clear cut. I mean, the forum with Trump, they had to make things up. Oh, he inflated his net worth, and Deutsche Bank was like, no, that's not true. With James and Schiff and others, it's what they put on the documents. That wasn't the case with Trump.
The rule of law is on our side.
But a grand jury in the Eastern District of Virginia disagrees. Andrew, how much trouble is she in?
Well, I think she's taking a play out of Donald Trump's playbook. You just deny everything and claim that it's some sort of conspiracy. The problem for LETICIA James is this is no conspiracy at all. The evidence is pointing straight at her for making false statements, for getting mortgages and engaging in home buying processes that seem to have been a clear violation of the law. Now, that has to be deeply investigated. Steps that are need to be taken to ensure that responsible law enforcement tactics are done here, and that it's not targeted at her because of her position, but rather because of the facts that support it. So I think she's in big trouble, and I think that the people of New York need to not be paying for that.
Unpack, if you will, so our viewers understand exactly what it is that she did wrong with this property, it appears, in Virginia in order to obtain a more favorable loan.
Well, there are two primary issues. One, that she listed this as intended to be a private personal residence as opposed to it being a rental property. There's different interest rates that come along with that type of election. And that's exactly what she went after Donald Trump for, that he was indicating false matters on his real estate documents.
They went after Trump, stating that he deceived Deutsche Bank because his property was worth $17 million. Do you think that Mar-a-Lago, in the chat, 600 people, Mar-a-Lago, when was it last worth $6 to $17 million, like 1958? It's a $1.5 billion property. He's a he was a former president. He's a current president, two-term president. And it's in the most lucrative, expensive area in the world. So, and it's like how many acres? So it's part of world history. It's not, you can't even really put a value on Mar-a-Lago. It's part of world history and American history. And they said, oh, it's $17 million. Therefore, Trump lied on the loan documents. It's like, or Trump lied on his taxes or documents. Like, no, my God, you were trying so desperately to destroy Trump. But actually, if you look at the documents that allegedly James and others utilized, Schiff, they potentially did lie. They weren't two-term presidents with, acres and acres of real estate in Palm Beach. And they don't have a $1.5 billion Mar-a-Lago. They could say, yeah, Deutsche Bank, these major banks are desperate to do business with us. They don't have that defense.
The other issue is that she had a building that had an occupancy for 5 units, but she claimed it had only 4 units, something that gave her beneficial treatment because of the smaller size of it, or the claimed smaller size. Both of those have serious financial benefits to the consumer who puts that on the forms. And ultimately, if that's not true.
So that is right here what the superseding indictment could be. Okay. So that the issue with the other unit that she had in Brooklyn.
A rental property, there's different interest rates that come along with that type of election. And that's exactly what she went after Donald Trump for, that he was indicating false matters on his real estate documents. The other issue is that she had a building that had an occupancy for 5 units, but she claimed it had only 4 units, something that gave her beneficial treatment because of the smaller size of it, or the claimed smaller size. Both of those have serious financial benefits to the consumer who puts that on the forms. And ultimately, if that's not true, it amounts to fraud. And again, is very similar to the type of misrepresentations on mortgage or real estate documents to lead to a windfall for the owner that she complained against Donald Trump for. So this is, I think, karma coming back to bite her, and maybe is why she knew to look into Donald Trump in the first place.
Well, and as you point out, you're raising the issue of karma. She was, of course, the lead prosecutor that went after President Trump, and now is having to appeal for paying millions of dollars. But at the end of the day, the last 10 seconds or so I've got with you, does this go to trial or is this plead out?
It'll go to trial because it's an indictment, and because that was analysis before the indictment. This is after the indictment.
Retired NYPD inspector and Fox News contributor. Okay, so we know this doesn't surprise us that she would come out and say this, obviously, and that Democrats are going to use this as a political, talking point. But doesn't this case have teeth?
It does, and I have to tell you that all you need to do is read the indictment to see that it does, because it's a very simple, plain-spoken indictment, which is crucial in a financial case, because in financial cases, they can get very complicated. You could potentially lose the jury. This one doesn't have that. Now, to clear something up, the primary residence issue is not here. That was the initial allegation we all heard about from the power of attorney form. What it comes down to is the following. She signed the operative paperwork to get the loan, saying that the house in Virginia is going to be a second house. not an investment property, a second house for her to go to herself. She's not allowed to have somebody there renting it. Okay, that's how she gets the loan. She then takes her paperwork for her taxes and puts on her tax forms that it is an investment property and in fact has write-offs relative to the investment property. So internally it's inconsistent by her own paperwork. By getting the lower rate for a non-investment property, she saved about $19,000 to this point. That is the crux of the allegation.
Okay, and so here's a senator from Michigan, Alyssa Slotkin. This is what she told CNN on Thursday.
Just as part of a bigger trend of the President of the United States using the Department of Justice, using the legal system to go after political adversaries, using the...
But they laughed at that when Trump was saying the same thing. Now they're saying what Trump was saying, and suddenly everyone needs to take it seriously. It's just unbelievable.
Arms of our democracy to go after political adversaries. It's just a broken way to do politics.
I wonder what you think about that, because nobody said that at the beginning when Letitia James went after Trump for the same thing.
Yeah, pretty rich when you consider the fact that that was her promise in coming into office as the Attorney General, that she was going to be using her office to go after Donald Trump, which is really not her remit as supposedly the top law enforcement officer in New York. And let's recognize something else. She also got through, it had to be for her sake, through Albany, a $10 million fund for anybody who has federal government coming after them for what they've done on the job and off the job.
So $10 million, let's say it takes a year, 2 years, but let's say there are more. $10 million should cover the indictment. The superseding indictment, maybe not. So she should have enough money to cover the initial indictment, which, by the way, I mean, what's the defense? In President Trump's defense, it was, well, Deutsche Bank made money. Deutsche Bank was literally asked that, and they said, yeah, we made money. We didn't rely on Trump's valuation. We did our own valuations, and we want to do business with Trump again. The bank has to go to bat for Letitia James and state, oh, what she did was fine, which would set a precedent. So not only did Deutsche Bank say, we want to work with Trump, we're going to defend Trump, we did not lose money, we made money. The banks with Letitia James have to say the same thing for her to have the same outcome as President Trump. They're not going to say that because what Letitia, if everyone does what Trump does, banks benefit big time. They work with billionaire presidents with $1.5 billion properties like Mar-a-Lago. That's wonderful for banks. If everyone does what Letitia James does, then you could have actually not just a mortgage crisis, you could have a financial crisis.
Anybody that's been targeted. So she's saying she hasn't accessed that fund yet. $10 million. She's got a high-priced lawyer, Abby Lowell's. I have a feeling the citizens of New York are going to be paying for Abby Lowell's swimming pool. So that $10 million is sitting there waiting for her to access it. The legislature put it through. The governor, Kathy Hochul, signed off on it. But here's the thing. The stakes for her are very high here because they're not going to plead this out. And if she gets convicted on a felony, which this is, she loses her law license and she has to step down. Essentially, she's going to be unemployable in public life in New York.
When I go down to Jersey really quickly here, we've got this crazy governor's race. It's getting very...
Could we see New York Attorney General Letitia James behind bars? Think of that. Joining us now is Greg Jarrett, Fox News legal analyst. All right, so mortgage fraud, and there's other stuff, wire fraud, bank fraud, the grand jury press charges. Greg, you tell me. I'm people telling me she could go to jail for 60 years, be fined $2 million, forfeit everything she owns. That's not near as bad as she tried to perpetrate against Mr. Trump for no good reason at all. But it's not a bad beginning.
Well, good to see you, Larry. If the facts stated in the indictment are true and accurate, then yeah, I mean, it's a serious case against Letitia James. Look, you cannot claim a house, whether it's primary or secondary, as an occupied residents obtain a lower, more favorable mortgage rate, and then behind the bank's back, rent it out. You're cheating the lender. You're lying about its usage and to its detriment. And documents show that James incriminated herself. Her mortgage insurance applications.
So the rebuttal from some people, like defending James, is that, well, there were family members there, but that's not. You're not obtaining any rental income, and it's not your primary residence. So you're not obtaining rental income. It's not your primary residence. So that's that. You can't, and James was an attorney general of New York. She had to have a primary residence at that location, not in Virginia.
Both said she would occupy the house at least partially, but then on IRS records, guess what? She admitted, oh no, it's purely a rental, zero personal occupancy. Well, can't be both. And it turns out that James never resided there even briefly. Her defense, we already know that from her lawyers, is, oh, it's a terrible misunderstanding. And, you know, it's a paperwork snafu. Somebody else is to blame.
Well, wait a minute. Wait a minute. A snafu? That was her whole argument against Trump. Business records that he probably never even saw. And she's got some little small Virginia Beach house that no one cares about. And she couldn't even get that right. And then she hires Abby Lowell of Hunter Biden. I mean, this whole thing, I have to get hold of myself. I must get hold of myself. I'm sorry. Please continue.
Well, your point is excellent, Larry, because under her own stated standard, in the case she brought against Donald Trump, she declared openly it's not an excuse that somebody else did the paperwork. The borrower is always responsible regardless of what others did. Even worse, Larry, she issued a statement, posted it on social media a year ago, and it said, everyday Americans cannot lie to a bank to get a mortgage. Powerful people cannot cheat to get better loans. Those words will haunt her in court.
Powerful people like the Attorney General of a large state. How about those kinds of powerful people? Wow. Does this, by the way, does this grand jury only affecting the Virginia property? I think it's Virginia Beach, but wherever it is in Virginia, or does that include the Brooklyn property? Because she kind of fibbed on the Brooklyn property too, did she not?
Yeah, at least that's what the head of the Federal Housing Finance Authority said in the criminal referral, that she misrepresented the occupancy of that house. And I believe there may be a criminal grand jury evaluating whether to charge her in New York as well as Virginia.
So that is the superseding indictment right here. So right here, ladies and gentlemen, that's it right here.
At least that's what the head of
jury only affecting the Virginia property. I think it's Virginia Beach, but wherever it is in Virginia, or does that include the Brooklyn property? Because she kind of fibbed on the Brooklyn property too, did she not?
Yeah, at least that's what the head of the Federal Housing Finance Authority said in the criminal referral, that she misrepresented the occupancy of that house. And I believe there may be a criminal grand jury evaluating whether to charge her in New York as well as Virginia. Of course, she's whining that the law is being weaponized against her. Spare me the moral outrage. She was the one who campaigned on getting Trump, then conjured up a ludicrous case that was slapped down by the appellate court. She became the face of Lawfare in New York and now has the audacity to claim, oh, I'm a poor victim of Lawfare by Trump. The irony is stunning.
As Miranda Devine reminded us last night here, no one's above the law. I mean, it was Letitia James that kept saying that. No one's above the law, including powerful people like the Attorney General of a large blue state. Lisa Cook at the Fed, she kind of got off. She's going to be both.
Elected or just been campaigning, who hasn't even looked, I guess, at
Analyst Greg Jarrett and Fox News contributor Nicole Parker. Thank you both for joining us. So, Greg, it's interesting. The American voter absolutely destroyed LETICIA James because they recognized what a completely partisan persecution her attempt to go after Trump was. And they obliterated her by reelecting Donald Trump president. And now she's going to cry and claim that she's being persecuted?
Yeah. Think about what she did. She went on the campaign trail and said, if you elect me, I will abuse my office to get Trump. And then she went about doing it. And now she has the audacity to claim, I'm a victim of weaponization of the law by Trump. These people have no ability at self-reflection. Look, when you tell a bank that your home is primary or secondary to get a lower mortgage rate and you're actually renting it out, that's fraud. You're lying to the lender. You're deceiving the lender about the financial risk. And here the documents, Charlie, incriminate James. She can hardly claim, it was miscommunication, because she's on record saying that's not an excuse. But worse, last year, she issues this public statement declaring that everyday Americans cannot lie to a bank to get a mortgage. Powerful people cannot cheat to get better loans. Well, looks like she did.
Yeah. Nicole, you've devoted your life to prosecuting, enforcing the law as an FBI agent and following all of the rules when you are going after a criminal. And it's kind of interesting to step back and remember everything that the FBI did under James Comey and then also LETICIA James in in New York. It's kind of amazing to look at all of the corners that they cut in both of those cases in order to go after one man. Have you ever seen anything like that?
Charlie, I had never seen anything like that before. And I actually just authored a book. It's called The Two FBIs. And I talk about how it was so blatant what I was seeing. I mean, I was living it firsthand. It's one thing to see news reports, but to actually walk into the FBI and to listen to what was happening on a day-to-day basis. They treated President Trump like he was on the FBI's top 10 most wanted list. I had never seen anything like it. And then we saw, as soon as he announced that he was running for president, they slapped him with like 91 charges nationwide. I mean, it's absolutely despicable and disgusting. But what I saw happening, you got LETICIA James here. She was unabashedly gloating and finding pleasure in going after President Trump. And what I find really disturbing is that these individuals, now that there is equal enforcement of the law, they call it political retribution. That's not political retribution. And all of a sudden they're crying foul play on DOJ. Where have you been the last 10 years that I had to work under the FBI starting around 2015 when you were just going after one side of the political spectrum? Anyone that knows anything, we could see it for exactly what it was. And now they're sitting here again, like Greg was saying, acting like they're victims. No, actually what you have is you have an AG and you have an FBI director. You've got Pam Bondi, Kash Patel, and they believe in enforcing laws fairly and equally, and they are not accustomed to that. LETICIA James and James Comey, they are not accustomed to that. They are the ones committing the crimes that they're actually out there accusing everyone else of, and now justice must be served.
Greg, I bet you get the same questions that I get very often from people, which is, will anyone pay a price for any of this?
Yeah, I think they could. And let me speak to James Comey, because I have a column tomorrow morning on foxnews.com on Comey. Look, when he was preening like a peacock in front of a camera saying, let's have a trial, that was just another pretense, a lie by phony Comey. It was a con job.
He wants to throw the case out, and that ain't going to happen because, well, it shouldn't happen, but it's almost certainly not going to happen because Hunter Biden and President Trump both said, hey, it's political problem. With President Trump, it was. Hunter and Comey and others, not the case where they were selectively prosecuted. Okay, Trump was selectively prosecuted. He didn't have a laptop full of potential bribery and graft. And Comey lied so much under oath, it's unbelievable. But let's continue.
The last thing he wants is a trial, which is why his lawyers this week said, we're going to file motions to dismiss the case, claiming, vindictive prosecution, selective prosecution, retribution by Trump. Comey's strategy, make no mistake, is to put Donald Trump on trial to avoid his own trial. He doesn't want to be put on trial. But typically that's an uphill battle because under law, you have to prove by clear evidence that the charges have an unjustified motive. If they're justified, it's not a defense. And of course, the argument that Trump is the terrible villain and poor Jimmy is the innocent victim, that's worthy of a Shakespearean farce, given Comey's long list of lawless schemes, deceptions, and abuses of power, Charlie.
Real quickly, Nicole, are you hopeful that anybody will pay a price for this?
I am hopeful because I think that's what Americans want. That's what we deserve. And I can tell you that FBI agents, current and former, there is nothing more that they want to see than equal enforcement of the law.
And you have whistleblowers, you have courageous former FBI officials like the lady you just saw. And yeah, it's not, I mean, you're not going to be able to, especially if they declassify documents, they're not going to simply be able to circumvent convictions. Law breaking was rampant when they tried to go after Trump. So this isn't difficult.
Former federal prosecutor and former acting ICE director, Jonathan Fahey. Jonathan, good to see you. Thanks so much for weighing in on this. You were actually a federal prosecutor in that office that indicted James. Your reaction?
Yeah, this is very interesting, and certainly the Democrats aren't saying no one is above the law today, but this is actually more interesting than I thought upon reading the indictment, because she did this, or allegedly claimed it was her residence, so she would get a favorable rate, and the amount of money she benefited from this is quite substantial. I believe it's about almost $19,000, so that's hardly insignificant. So this will be very interesting to play out, but it seems to me if she filled out these forms saying it's for one thing and then used it exclusively for another thing, which is as a rental property, and just simply did so to make money, I'm not sure what the defense will be. Maybe there is one, but it does seem this could be fairly clear cut. And interestingly about her statement and the other statements, they're not saying, hey, I didn't lie on the forum. They're just saying, the political stuff, which is, rich and ironic and everything else. But this does seem like it could be quite a clean case.
So the defense will probably be, the lender or the banks knew. But see, the banks are going to have to go on record defending LETICIA James, which they might do. But if they do that, then they could be sued, or they could lose future lawsuits against individuals that defraud them. See, Deutsche Bank literally defended Trump because they want to work with former presidents. Okay, here's a newsflash to wonderful, morally superior liberal Democrats. Trump won, and he continues to win, in large part because he's a former president who's a billionaire, who has billions in property, $1.5 billion in Mar-a-Lago by one estimate from a top realtor in that location. And so banks want to work with billionaires. Banks don't need to work with Democratic or Republican politicians. Okay? They want to work with billionaires because they know that generally, if the billionaire has, a whole lot of property and assets like Trump does, they'll make money, which is what Deutsche Bank did. But LETICIA James is accused of having lied on forms to save about $20,000 or so. It's a substantial amount of money. So the defense will be, the bank knew. Well, now, what do you think is going to happen? You think the bank is going to act in the manner that Deutsche Bank acted with Trump? You think the bank is going to or the lenders are going to defend LETICIA James? That would be open season for mortgage fraud leveled against those banks.
They prove she made the statements and prove she never lived there and just rented it out, or lived there for a certain period and then rented it out. I think she's got some problems.
Well, I'll tell you, we go back to how LETICIA James was trying so hard to, quote unquote, get Trump. And part of her efforts, I remember her saying she wanted to take away his property. That's why the Democrats are trying to, allege that this is some kind of retribution, but the facts are the fact. If she lied to a financial institution, if she lied in terms of these properties, then it's very hard to argue that. And despite all of her efforts to get Trump, this is about the law.
Yeah, that's a very good point, because the other side of it is, if they do have evidence that she committed these crimes, are they supposed to just walk away from it because they don't want to be accused of political retribution? So, but it is funny. She tried to ruin him financially, ruin his business, crush his employees as part of this orchestrated scheme to get him for political reasons. And remember, she ran on it. So it wasn't like, anyone could say hers was not political.
Absolutely. She absolutely ran on it. She said she was going to get Trump. That was all her campaigning for several months. Joining me now.
So you have, ladies and gentlemen, a pretty clear-cut case. The superseding indictment will almost certainly be the Brooklyn property, but that's in New York. So they were able to get the indictment for the Virginia property. They're probably working on the indictment for the New York property, and there might be other examples of fraud as well. They went after Trump. See, it's not retribution when you create the political and legal atmosphere. If you're going to go after Trump for saying he knew exactly what he signed, therefore, you knew exactly what you signed as well. I mean, you're never giving Trump the benefit of the doubt, but you demand the benefit of the doubt that you denied Donald Trump. How does that work?
Well, I think they say people in glass houses shouldn't throw stones. Right. It's beyond ironic that the allegations that she's now facing stem from the exact same types of mortgage fraud or loan type fraud that Trump went through that incredible civil trial on, where he defended himself, and he said that those banks and those financial institutions that he dealt with had acknowledged and had their own fair opportunity to look into and do their research. The allegations against Leticia James are not quite as friendly to her, and they look quite damning. Now, the DOJ is going to start their investigation. That's going to take some time. I don't know how many resources they're going to put behind that, but if these allegations that are being put forth turn out to be true, she is going to be facing the same sort of bankruptcy and turning over of her assets to the state that Donald Trump had to through that trial.
Well, I've got a follow-on question for this. Do you remember the February meeting between Trump and Governor Hochul?
All right, so you have a number of people stating that Newsweek, other publications, that Leticia James will receive more indictments, superseding indictments, possibly pertaining to the Brooklyn property that she allegedly owns, and possibly lied about the number of units to pay less in property tax or mortgage rates or insurance. Hit subscribe to this channel. Go to H.A. Goodman's other channel right after this. And ladies and gentlemen, what can I tell you? I'll be back at probably about 10:30 p.m. Eastern this evening. God bless you all. Be here on this channel this evening.